Hey, everybody in Parent Tween Connection Land. Welcome back to week 2 of our inaugural roundtable. I'm super excited to have all of our listeners with us, whether you're with us live or whether you catch us on replays. And I'm super excited to have an array of professionals with us talking about all kinds of things. If you missed last week, we had teen mentors, we had college admissions, we had study skills, we had how to listen to your intuition, all kinds of cool stuff. And today we're kicking off week 2 with one of my favorite humans on the planet.
Wow.
And I mean that sincerely. When the first time Lisa and I met, we totally just hit it off. We could have talked for hours. She welcomed me onto her Instagram Live, and I was thrilled to be able to extend an invitation to the roundtable. So Lisa from Been There Got Out, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. And Clarissa, such a warm welcome. And I'm looking forward to meeting you in person, hopefully next month.
In just a few weeks. That's the plan. So Lisa, name of your business is Been There, Got Out. Where and why do I want
out? Okay, so you had all that fun stuff last week, and now we're getting to the down and dirty, yucky stuff of divorce. So Been There, Got Out is the name of my business with my partner, who's also my life partner, Chris, and we are high conflict divorce coaches. I always start by saying Chris is a certified high conflict divorce coach, and I'm a state certified domestic violence advocate. And our goal is to help anyone struggling in toxic relationships, divorce, custody battles, and co-parenting hell have the chance of the best outcome in court and beyond.
And, you know, I love that you say the best possible outcome, because the fact is there is still a co-parent in some fashion in these situations, anyway, right? And I don't think anybody necessarily goes into marriage with the idea of like, oh, I recognize that this could be, could turn into an unmitigated disaster and that I could ever even imagine needing somebody like you. So
Never.
How is it somebody like you, to give folks a little bit of a background of where we're coming from and why high conflict coaching and domestic violence advocacy and such is so important to you? Can you give us the Reader's Digest background on your experience that you came to being who and what you are today?
Okay, I will try, and you just interrupt me because I'm a talker. Okay, right. So I was in a long-term marriage with my ex for 20 years. That was our relationship. We were married for almost 18 with 2 kids, had no idea what domestic abuse was, thought my ex was my best friend, thought we would be the last people that would ever get a divorce. And in 2013, it became apparent. Short version, he was living a double life for our entire marriage. And I thought I would try to wait it out till the kids got to college. And it just became more painful to stay than to leave. It took 2 years to finally get him out. And I thought, okay, we both agreed. We both knew that the marriage was over. And, it would be amicable. We'd work together, and I was looking forward to having some weekends to myself without the kids, because I felt like I had been primarily responsible for most of the parenting. Mm-hmm. So what happened was the opposite. And I can talk about some of the things. When I met my divorce attorney in the first consult, he said, "You're going to have one of the bad ones." And I was like, what? My husband at the time, I thought he's a good person who's done some bad things. And fast forward, it is now 2023. I have been in court with this person for 9 years, divorce and post-judgment, trying to get him to adhere to our divorce agreement. I have saved myself well over $1 million at this point, because I've been representing myself for about 6 years. But the first year, the divorce took a year and $100,000. And our clients have far worse than I do with time and amount of money spent. So basically, after getting out and being connected with the police department and the local domestic violence center, when I thought, oh, it's been a year and 9 months, I have nothing to worry about, they were like, no, actually, stalking is very dangerous. And the fact that this person is still doing it after being out of the house, living in another state, and still hanging around means you are in grave danger and you need to take this seriously. And my life completely changed, and I learned all about domestic violence and became an advocate and all kinds of other stuff. So, but
okay. We'll get So it's interesting that you said when you've had your first consultation with the divorce lawyer that the attorney was like, yeah, this is going to be one of the bad ones. And so I know one of the things that you really work to educate families on, or folks who are looking down the path of divorce, of like, what are the red flags? Like, how did your attorney know to tell you this was going to be ugly, as opposed to like, okay, we can make this work?
Okay, so my attorney, I have to say, my attorney became my best friend for the year. He's like a lovely human being. And after years had passed, we stayed in touch, and I went to him and said, Eric, we're writing a book, and our book is actually coming out next month. But I want you to go over with me what these red flags were. Like, how did you know? So I'm going to go through part of one of the chapters. This is just a snippet of one of the chapters of our book, and that's about 6 factors that indicate a high conflict divorce. Now, keep in mind that most divorces tend to be amicable. Our world, we do 100% the crazy stuff. So we're very comfortable with it. And sometimes I forget that there's normal, rational people who actually separate and, you know, go on with their lives and work to keep their children happy and healthy. But high conflict divorce is about 5 to 10% of all divorce cases. And they're very, very different than typical divorces. So here's the 6 factors that indicate or predict a high conflict divorce. And this is my attorney reported back to me, and wow, he was spot on. Okay, so somebody who has a denied or unaddressed addiction. So somebody who's addicted to drugs, alcohol, sex, gambling, anything like that, who is not in recovery. There's plenty of people in recovery who are working on themselves, and that'll be fine. That should be fine. But somebody who denies that they have a problem, they have impaired judgment. So they're not looking to fix things. They're unable to see the consequences of their actions. And that really, really interferes with the divorce process, where it's best for people to come in and cooperate and be rational and work together. Okay. So it's very hard to work with somebody who's irrational. Okay, number 1. Number 2, mental health issues. Again, that's often the cause of high conflict behavior. So sometimes, and I'm not saying that all people with mental illness are like that, but a lot of toxic people who have mental illness are working, their priority is just to maintain power and control over the other person. Their goal is to hurt you. They will do whatever they can to try to regain the power. We often say to our clients that once the relationship has ended, they're limited in how they can exert control over you. When you live together, they could do it on a daily basis. But when you're separated, they're limited to the court, your kids, and money. And they will scorch the earth trying to destroy you, which is not what happens in a normal divorce. So it's unfortunate. Nobody else understands it. People will say all the time, but why doesn't that person just do this? And why? And I don't know, but they just don't. And it's very, very hard to deal with that because you're already in this chaotic situation.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Number 3. And interrupt me, Clarissa. Just stop me anytime.
No, I'm taking notes. I'm not concerned on my behalf. But I know others might not be either, but like I'm taking notes just so that I can be better educated. So carry on. Number 3.
Well, you know, I used to be a high school English teacher, so I love when people take notes, and I often tell people, get out that pen, start taking notes. This is important.
Absolutely.
Okay. So the next one is your ex denying financial responsibility. So many high conflict people have a sense of entitlement, and money is their number 1 priority. So Absolutely. In a divorce, when you have children, child support needs to be figured out. It's used with a calculator. A lot of states deal with maintenance or alimony. We need to split property, things like that. And assets need to be divided. But somebody who does not take financial responsibility is just like, no, like it's mine and I'm not going to cooperate with the process. And it makes it extremely difficult. It is one of the top reasons that people end up in these long dragged out court battles, because people do not cooperate with dividing assets. And that goes to the next one, which they kind of go together, is when you have an ex who hides assets and income. And so looking back on my own situation, my ex owned a lot of property with his sister. And he always was like, well, this is mine, and I'm going to have mail sent to a different address. And I'm going to tell you that we're losing money on all these buildings when we definitely are not, because that doesn't make any sense. Why would you have them for 30 years if you're losing money? But like really hid everything. And I like to use the quote with our clients because the same as me, it's what's mine is mine and what's yours is mine too. So in his mind, he could keep all his property, but also split up everything else. And whatever was hidden was not for me either. So that is very, like I said, just very difficult. There's something called the discovery process in a divorce where you're supposed to share your records. And that's how people determine what's fair. And a high conflict person will not do it. They do all kinds of things. And we have interviews with a lot of professionals on financial abuse, which is present in 99% of domestic abuse cases. But people who will not cooperate with the money.
Okay. No.
Okay. All right. Another one that is unusual that I thought, wow, Eric, I didn't know this one, is when there is emotional abuse, that can make a divorce high conflict or drag it out longer because the difficult person knows how to manipulate someone like our client, a victim, to make them believe that they could work things out, or we don't need a lawyer, or they're going to change. And so it's like a lot of stopping and starting, and that can
All right, we're back. I'm not sure. Lisa, are you there?
Yeah. I just said this. It was spinning the little worm.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Welcome back to Live with Internet Challenges, right? So I was at, I'll do a quick recap for anyone just coming in. Denied or unaddressed addiction, like there is an addiction, but they don't acknowledge it or aren't fixing it because they have impaired judgment. Mental health challenges that lead to control and manipulation. Denying financial responsibility, you said, which also leads into hiding assets and income. And then my internet went down apparently when you went to go talk about number 5.
Okay, we'll pretend it was a commercial break. So we're talking about abuse cases. And I was saying that my lawyer, this was something I had never considered. And that's where you have this power dynamic in the relationship where one person's in control and the other one is hopeful. And so in situations, especially with emotional abuse, which is really common, one person will hoover, the term is, it's the British word for vacuum, like pull them back into the relationship, like, oh, maybe let's work this out. I'm going to be better. I'm going to go to therapy. You don't need to see my records. You know what a good person I am. I'm going to be a great parent. Let's not use attorneys. Let's do things ourselves, like all kinds of manipulation, which drags out the process and also makes it very, very difficult for lawyers because they're moving towards let's finish this. Like if you want to do it, let's finish it. And it's a lot of stopping and starting, and that can run up a lot of money, and delays can also make you have to start certain things all over again. I know in our state of Connecticut, once somebody files papers, you have a year and a trial date is set. So you have a year to figure out things. And if you don't, then I don't know what happens, but I'm glad I don't know what happens. But you go to trial, or I don't know, maybe you start all over again. So it's very expensive and difficult.
Yeah.
It's frustrating for your family and your kids. And, so that's tricky. And then the last one that we have on our list is anger that does not subside. So in most separations and divorces, everybody's paying lots of money and they're like, this is crazy and I'm really mad. But generally, according to my old divorce attorney, within 4 to 6 months, it's like, whoa, let's just finish this. Like, we're angry. Let's calm down. Let's move on with our lives and take care of the kids. It's the opposite in high conflict cases. Like I said, I am 9 years in the system. My ex is filing new motions. We have clients who have been in the system for 13 years. Somebody got in touch a couple of days ago and said she was in the system for 30 years. That is somebody who has a serious problem, it's basically called legal abuse. That's our specialty, by the way. I say unfortunately, but somebody who weaponizes the legal system to keep things going, which is a tremendous form of financial abuse because it's very expensive to keep
Yes.
things going in court.
Yes.
Often filing one motion is thousands of dollars. That doesn't include lawyer prep time, trial, the delays that happen all the time. I mean, it's just a ton of money. So anger that doesn't subside, that's a sign of high conflict. Where, you know, it's been years later and they're angrier than ever. Problem personality. So there's my list of indicators of high conflict divorce.
Okay, so if those are like the 6 big red flags, or as a friend of mine put it at one point, if it's not a red flag, it should at least be a pink Post-it note, right? Like, pay attention.
Yes.
So, like, I had a conversation with a woman today who couldn't join us live, but she's thinking that she's like 1.5 to 3 years out from being ready to take steps toward filing for divorce. How do you like, okay, great. We know we can see the light coming, right? And it's not the end of the tunnel. It's the train.
It's the beginning of the tunnel.
Right?
It's
so
just the beginning.
Having somebody like you or an attorney on their sides, like, one of the things that you talk a lot about is like how to choose the right divorce attorney. And I know my husband was married once before. Thankfully, there weren't children involved, because that made that aspect of things easier for him to separate and carry on. But he said he loved his attorney because he was a bitter man against his own ex-wife, and that he, like, my husband was like, this guy's gonna like totally side with the guy in the relationship, right? And I've heard a lot of people who are like, I loved my attorney, like, odd situation, but like, how do you find one that you love?
Okay, so first of all, no, we come up with terminology all the time. And so somebody who is a couple of years before filing is probably very smart, because they realize that there's a lot of planning that has to take place. And one of the most important types of planning that someone can do is what's called safety planning. And that's something that I guess I was doing without knowing what I was doing. But I now wish I had been in contact with a local domestic violence center, because it's a free, excellent resource. And it's not just about your physical safety, but it's about getting you organized, knowing what things to try to take with you, how or you feel like you might have to exit quickly, having 2 plans, like one if you have to leave quickly, or one if you can plan gradually to get out. So it's really important to think about that, especially if you have kids and if you have pets too, because it's much more difficult when you're in the middle of an emergency. So
sure,
I would say
that makes total sense.
Yeah. So we call people at the beginning of the process, like this woman, our babies. And the babies actually have the most power because they haven't made many of the expensive mistakes that most people do who are already in the process. Like, a lot of people end up on our doorstep and they're just like, I wish I had known about you guys like years ago.
Sure,
because
absolutely.
So it is really good that if someone is listening now, that they're thinking about what needs to be done. I know for me, it took 2 years. Like, I thought, I'm done. 2013, I mean, that's a whole other story. But I realized, like, I was really settled in the community. I had a business. My kids were settled. Like, I couldn't just get up and leave. And people often say, well, why didn't you just leave? Well, it's really complicated. There's a lot to consider, more than anybody could imagine. And this is why it takes an average of 7 to 9 times to get out of these types of relationships, because it is really, really hard. So, and that's a whole other topic. Right. But anyway,
so the safety planning with a local
domestic violence center. It's free. In my head, I thought domestic violence is battered women. It's not. And this is what we talk about with coercive control, like emotional abuse, legal abuse, sexual abuse, financial abuse, which, again, like I said, present in 99% of toxic relationships, where money's being hidden, things are not fair, there's no transparency. So anyway, but finding the right attorney, we don't say finding a good attorney. We always say finding the right attorney, because it's so important. And again, I was really, really lucky with my divorce attorney. The way to find one, which was recommended to me, was to ask somebody who'd been through a divorce or worked in that system. And I had a good friend who worked in the court system and had worked with an attorney like 20 years before. And so she recommended him. And our first meeting, I was like, I don't even need to talk to anybody else because I just love you. He was, well, I'll go into some of the qualities. So number one, again, taking notes, what to look for in a really good divorce attorney. You want someone who has emotional intelligence. Whether it's high conflict or not, divorce is really, really difficult. So you want someone who can deal with things well and will protect you because they're going to be your advocate. Now, Clarissa, and I don't know if other people know, but we do tons of interviews with various professionals, especially family lawyers. And we have a good friend named Rayford Palmer. He's in Chicago, and he wrote a book called I Just Want This Done, which isn't about high conflict divorce. It's just about any kinds of divorce. And he was saying that in law school, lawyers are trained 90% in the law and 10% in client relations. But in real life, you're dealing with 90% client relations and emotions and all that stuff. So you want to find that special person or a divorce coach who can deal with all of the emotional stuff that you're dealing with. So you're not spending hundreds of dollars an hour on an attorney who, again, is not trained. So the attorney's not to manage your emotional needs, but they do, they should be understanding of what you're going. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, the kind of lawyer, which it sounds like your husband might have had, a lot of people say, oh, I want a really aggressive lawyer. I don't know if that's how he'd classify him, but people often refer to it as a pit bull attorney. I want to go after this person. The problem with pit bull attorneys is fighting costs a lot of money. And attorneys sometimes get, and I just did an interview about this last week, but they get into pissing contests with each other and they send lots of emails back and forth about nonsense stuff, and you are paying for it.
I was going to say, they make sure to start the timer when they start that email.
Oh, shoot.
Nope, we're back. I was just saying they make sure to start the email or start the timer when they start writing that email.
Yep. Yeah. So a pit bull attorney, you want somebody who can try to work with others, but often our clients' exes hire very vicious attorneys. Like 95% of them tend to be bullies. And so they can be very difficult to work with your own attorney. Right. So again, that emotional intelligence should try to kick in. They do have to recognize this is a different kind. If it is high conflict, it is a different type of negotiation, whole different thing than what you do with a normal divorce. And that's why part of what we do with our clients is you don't need to have an attorney who totally understands narcissism or gets it. They don't need to know that, but we call it taking strategic oversight of your case. If you know that you have this kind of person, you can still educate your lawyer because you'll know what points work, what leverage you might have, and working with a good divorce coach can help you bring that to your attorney so you can use the attorney more efficiently.
That makes a whole lot of sense. Okay, good. So then you were also talking about I'm sorry, were there other characteristics? I almost jumped the gun.
Okay, yeah, those are the two main ones. But I think from the first interview, there's also expectations you should have of the relationship. And one thing, and now I have to credit a good friend of ours, a Canadian lawyer that we do a series with called The Client as Consumer. His name is David Morneau, and he actually wrote the foreword to our book, and we just adore him. But so some of what I'm about to say is what came out of our first Client as Consumer series on how to choose the right attorney. And then I've taken stuff from other lawyers I've talked to. So he said that the first consult should go both ways. It shouldn't just be you asking the lawyer questions. They should be asking questions about you because they want to have clients that they get along with as well. So just expect it to be a dialogue, not just you ask questions and they answer. They should be curious about your situation. Another thing for our people is we call the knight in shining armor. You cannot do more knights in shining armor. So people say, I'm out of this awful situation. Now my lawyer is going to save my life. So here's my $15,000 retainer. Take care of me. I'm not going to pay attention to my case. You cannot do that. It's your life. It's your kids' lives if you have kids. There's a lot involved. Attorneys have many clients. Most of them tend to not pay as much attention as you do. You know your case, you know your life better than anybody else, and you need to be on top of things. Mm-hmm. They can make little tiny mistakes unintentionally, and you have no recourse. and you're stuck with it. That's why a lot of what Chris and I do for people too is review written agreements very carefully. And then they go back to their attorney and check it. And also my background is as a high school English teacher, writer. I worked as an editor. So it's like we proofread everything. I have caught other attorneys post-judgment doing things for me, messing up stuff like, oh, it's 6% interest. No, it's 9% interest. No, it's not, Lisa. Yes, it is. Oops, sorry. That was like thousands of dollars, So you really need to stay on top of things and not think of them as your knight in shining armor.
Okay.
And speaking of that, this is similar but a little different. Is you don't want to repeat the whole toxic relationship dynamic. So people in these relationships, like I was in, and all of our clients and many other people are in, one person tends to have more authority in the relationship, and that's just what you're used to. So sometimes when people get an attorney, they're just like, I'm going to trust this person, again, like to take care of me and save my life, and I'm not going to pay much attention. But you're basically repeating the same cycle. And a lawyer, while many of them are lovely people, you have to realize there's a little bit of a conflict of interest because the harder your case is, the more money they make. Mm-hmm. Now, a lot of lawyers are wonderful. Like my old divorce lawyer was like, I don't want any of your clients. Like I want the easy cases. I don't need the money. I don't want to be up at night. So, but so you want to really, again, like stay on top of things. It takes a lot of growing up and saying, I can't just trust somebody because they're my attorney or they're my therapist or whatever. You really need to still pay attention. And that's a whole other conversation too. Okay. Another thing is questions. So I said before that it should be a back and forth, but also some lawyers don't want you to ask questions, but according to our David lawyer, he said questions should be not just allowed, but they should be encouraged. You want somebody to work with you in terms of coming up with strategy. So, you need to have a dialogue again, and that moves into the next one. And tell me if I'm going too fast, but we tend to think about working on these crazy cases as a collaboration. Certainly your lawyer knows the law. They understand, but they do need to listen to your goals and help advocate for you. You cannot just, again, hand it over and let them make decisions. You need to figure out goals and what you're really looking for. And part of what Chris and I do is what we call the harsh New York reality check. Like we'll be like, that's a lovely goal. You're never going to get it. Let's get a little more realistic with how family court works and stuff like that. But you want to work with your attorney. You want to give the right information. You don't want to overwhelm them with documentation. That's what, again, Chris and I do a lot with helping people target their documentation, because you want them to build as strong a case as possible and get you out of the legal system. Mm-hmm. And then the last thing on this particular list is to keep in mind that the lawyer is not in charge of everything. There's something called the Messiah complex, which our friend Rayford told us about, where lawyers will say, well, it's my case. Like, I don't want anyone else helping or being involved in it. Our clients have a lot of stuff going on. They need therapy. They need other support. If they don't have friends and family, they need a coach, they need a support group, they need a community. So what we call, and what David called, lawyers who are very proprietary, like this is mine and I can make the best decision on my own because I'm the lawyer. That doesn't seem to be a very healthy relationship. So you got to keep an eye out for that.
Okay. So it seems like a whole lot of questions that, what I'm hearing is like interview lawyers, ask for references, ask for referrals, and interview them. Is it pretty standard that family law attorneys will give some kind of a complimentary meeting or an introduction type of deal? No. Okay, so you're paying for a lot of that. Yeah,
you're paying for it. So that's the thing. Complimentary is rare, very, very rare. So usually they charge for an hour. Some lawyers don't charge for it. But, that's why you want to really be prepared. And if you want, I don't know how much time we have, Clarissa, but I can go into like some basic questions to ask too. They're a little different than a typical list. Okay.
Yeah, let's ask. We've got probably another 5 minutes for this primary conversation, and then we'll head over to Parent Tween Village for the next bit. But go for it.
Okay. All right. So questions to ask an attorney, we like to focus on open-ended questions. So sometimes people say, do you have experience with high conflict cases? Everyone's going to say yes. That's not helpful. So here's some questions that we like to ask. And again, this is not just me making this up. This is from interviewing lots of attorneys and other people on like, what's the best questions that someone should ask you? Number one, what is your experience with domestic violence? A lot of lawyers are not trained in domestic abuse. The high conflict cases really benefit from having an attorney who gets it on some level. Even if they don't understand narcissism and personality disorder, just to have some sense of like, you got to treat this one differently.
Right.
So very, very important. And another question that fits with that is you might want to say, how do you support clients who come to you in a broken state? Because that is the state that our clients arrive in. That's the state most of them come to our doorstep in, and they're a very vulnerable audience. And so it's important to have a lawyer, again, that's very sensitive and has emotional intelligence. Okay, another good question to ask that most people don't think of is, what resources do you have connections to? Again, mental health professionals. It's important to have lawyers. It's nice to have a lawyer who knows other people, so you're not searching by yourself for a therapist. Most of them will not have them on staff, but a lawyer who knows some good divorce coaches, who knows like a great therapist. Our clients are so overwhelmed. It's just helpful to have somebody who's like, I got you. Yes, I have some good names. So ask that question. Like, what other experts? Do they have a forensic investigator? Do they know a good psychologist or a guardian ad litem, somebody who does custody evaluation? Things like that can be really helpful. Good mediators. These are all the players who may get involved with your case. So it's good to know that your lawyer is friendly with other people.
Well, and I think that's a good reminder for folks is that, like we had an interview with one of our trusted experts last week, Fran Gallagher, who was saying that independence is a farce. We're in fact interdependent.
Right.
So I think if nothing else, as I'm thinking about it, again, like thankfully I've never contemplated divorce.
Good,
like,
don't.
Right? But like going, okay, so I have my attorney, but I think a lot of people operate under the idea that an attorney is the only resource that they're going to need in the process. Like they don't necessarily think about a mediator. If the attorney works with a mediator, the mediator may be at a lower rate. Or if there's a coach who can be like, hey, been there, done that, as you say, got out, here are other things to look for at somewhat lower rate, or just pieces like you've got different experience than the attorney has. It's another case, in parent tween land, we say it takes a village to raise a child, but it almost sounds like it takes a village to get out sometimes.
Absolutely. And we often talk about an image of a table. We say you're the top of the table and you need as many legs as possible to be as stable to get through this most difficult thing you'll ever deal with. You got friends and family. They love you, but they don't always get it. Like, why didn't you leave sooner? Why doesn't the judge do that? Why doesn't your ex do that? And it's hard to deal with their emotions as well as your own. Then you have your lawyer. They're expensive. Their job is just to translate your case into the law, not to be your emotional support. Then you have your therapist. Their job is to help you heal, but they'll sometimes give you bad advice like, oh, just gray rock. Like somebody's sending you stuff, just don't even answer. Terrible advice when you're in a custody battle. And that's where Chris and I come in. High conflict divorce coach is like, you don't want to be slammed with a parental alienation claim. So let's do things properly in terms of communication and preparing evidence and blah, 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 to get to make you use your attorney more efficiently and save time, money, and energy, because these things go on for a while, even when they're not high conflict sometimes.
Right.
Okay. So back to the list though. The teacher in me is like, back on track.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go for it.
Another very, very, very important question. How do you bill? Most attorneys bill in 6-minute increments. We have several attorneys as our clients. And people think, oh my God, why would an attorney hire you? Well, because it's their life and they can't handle their case by themselves and they need support. And it's knowing, who I need on my team. So we have attorneys, and a couple of our attorneys are from New York City. And they said, to ask an attorney a question, it's $95. Because you send it, they have to read it, they have to have somebody file it, they have to craft a response, and sometimes it's followed up with a phone call. And so you need to understand like all of the back and forth conversation, how much money it's going to cost you. Don't send every little thing to your attorney. I made that mistake. My attorney was my best friend for a year and I ran up that bill. So there's a lot of other people like us. We actually do free check-ins for our clients where it's like, a lot of these are not legal questions, they're emotional questions. I could talk you off the ledge in 5 minutes for free if you're our client already. So don't waste all the money with your attorney, or gather up a bunch of questions and do it all at once, not here and there. Okay. So another question to ask is, what other options are available for resolving family conflict? So we hope that it's not high conflict. And even when it is, most people try to do mediation because it's a fraction of the cost. There's arbitration. Different states have different countries have different ways you can try to do it. Sometimes attorneys can work together. We work with our clients to sort of do private negotiation before they go to mediation. Doesn't always work, obviously, but just anything to try to save money and not having a third party, a judge, make these huge life decisions, because it is very hard to mediate with these people. Sometimes you can get some stuff done, but you have a lot more power over the outcome when you're participating in the process. Okay. Another interesting question that one of our Georgia attorneys, her name is Joanna Boyd, gave us to ask, which I was like, oh, I never would have thought of that, is how do you stay on top of the law and still do your job? Because I know with me, like I participated in submitting live testimony for something called Jennifer's Law in Connecticut, which made it the third state to expand its definition its legal definition of domestic violence. But a lot of attorneys in Connecticut don't know what coercive control is yet. They don't know what Jennifer's Law is. So lawyers have to really stay on top of things. So you want to find a lawyer who's reads up on the law and figures out a way to do it. Yeah. Because a lot of times new laws can protect you even more, but your lawyer has to know that. I've remember teaching my lawyer, not in Connecticut, in New York. I was like, did you know that he was like, oh, I didn't even know about that. I thought, oh, wow. So again, we always encourage our clients, take strategic oversight, like pay attention, help educate. Okay. Another really good question is, how would you handle a case like mine? That's a great way to figure out strategy and to see if your lawyer actually has experience with cases similar to yours. Now, granted, in the beginning, you often have no idea what you're in for, but people switch attorneys all the time. They talk about, like when I met Eric the first time and I told him I didn't ask that question. Maybe I should have, but it would have been interesting to hear what he had to say. But it is important because, like what we do with our clients, is strategy. How are we going to get this done as cheaply, as quickly as possible, if it is possible? And then the last question on my list is, tell me what you've heard about my goals and concerns with my case. And this gives you a chance to see, has this person really been listening to you?
Yep.
And yeah, it's a great test.
Well, and that's something even that is a really great way. It's one of the things we talk about just in the foundations of connection, of like listening and then taking the time to reflect back what you've understood, to show the other person that you've gotten things. So it could even be like, hey, okay, this is what I understand that you have said. And now I just want to actually check in with you and make sure, even if you feel like kind of iffy about that, like you feel like you're kind of being a witch and asking them that, like, but be like, okay, I want to make sure I've communicated correctly. And so it's almost like taking it on yourself, but giving you the opportunity to respond to that, because maybe you did leave something out, or maybe they weren't listening or whatever. But then that gives you insight as to, okay, I know I said this and they didn't hear me. That's good information for me.
Right.
So,
yeah.
All right. I'm going to wrap us up because we are going to be back here in our Parent-Tween Connection group with Linda Holland back at the top of the hour, talking about why senior year is too late to start thinking about the college planning process. But in the meanwhile, Lisa and I are going to head over to Parent-Tween Village to have an intimate conversation about the 3 elements of persuasion that you need to know before you enter a family courtroom. But before we do that, I always ask our guests, Lisa, everything that we do here at Parent-Tween Connection is based on connection. And so we have what we call the foundations of connection, which are create a safe place, observe, non-judgment, nod and smile, explore, challenge your truths, take your time, innovate, own your own story, and nurture. And so I'm curious, which of those either resonates most with you personally or like relative to our conversation today? Like 3 sentences. What do you think is the one that like stands out the most?
I feel like I'm on a game show. Like, well, there's 3 that stood out. Take your time. Like, this should be a very deliberate process. It tends to be highly emotional. You don't want to make quick decisions about anything you want. And also it goes with exploring and owning your story. Like, take responsibility, realize this is not going to be easy. Sure. You got to grow up and figure out, like, I got to take control of my life, own my own story, and figure out what I need. And I'm going to learn a lot along the way, and it's going to be much better on the other side. Bless you.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Yep, I muted just for the sneeze. So awesome. Thank you for being with us, Lisa. For those of you who are in Parent Train Village, you can pop over to our Facebook group there as well. If you're listening to this sometime down the road and you're interested in our exclusive conversation with Lisa or with any other members of the roundtable or our podcast, you can pop over to our website, parenttrainconnection.com, and there's info there. These will be available forever. So Lisa, thank you for being with us, and we'll see you in Parent Train Village momentarily.
Okay, thanks, Clarissa. See you soon.